and intro and all of those. Fantastic. Great.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the 5th class of six teachings from Miffi, Maxmillion, and today's topic is patience to overcome anger.
Yes, so let's dive right in, shall we? It's the topic du jour, isn't it? So the whole course about healing anxiety and depression, and so we have to look at what the causes of anxiety and depression are to be able to heal it. So it's not just trying to get rid of anxiety and depression, because they're evidence that we have a problem, that something's out of kilter. And so what we've covered so far, I'll just get our screen share up just to kind of put everything into context. What we've covered so far, the context, the nature of our mind. Our nature is fundamentally pure, whether we recognize it or not, whether we feel it at the moment or not. This is the context, this understanding, very sophisticated understanding of the nature of the mind and how we exist. And it's not fundamentally broken, it's fundamentally pure. Just like energy, you know, energy is fundamentally pure. It can have all sorts of things happen to it and go skew-if, but fundamentally it is pure. And so because of this, it gives us a very strong basis that it's worth delving into this and trying to remove all the toxicity. And at the moment, we're dominated by what are called the inner terrorists, the disturbing emotions that create that turbulence in our mind. And our job is to be like the inner security guard in an airport or a mall. And most of us, well, I don't know about you guys, but often I feel like poor old Paul Blart, you know, the mall cop. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie, but, you know, help's on the way. And until then, there's Paul Blart. So how educated, how equipped are we to deal with the turmoil that arises in our mind? It's certainly not anything that we're taught at school. And actually, it's only when things go wrong and we seek so-called professional help that we even begin to be educated how to help ourselves. I mean, it's a miracle that society has survived this far with how little mind or heart education that we get how to live harmoniously. We've also touched on something called cognitive fusion, where we conflate how things appear, how things first feel, with how things are. So if something feels bad, then we think it is bad, and how that's a big mistake. That's not necessarily true. And we're going to continue on with this theme today. Last week, we looked at how to listen to the kernel of wisdom that we find in anxiety. So anxiety being the catastrophic result of attachment. So we don't even know we have attachment until something goes wrong. And the evidence of attachment is that we are overrun by anxiety, by worry, by worry about losing what we have, not getting what we want, things changing, all of this. And we grasp onto those external things of which we have very little control over. And then we think, oh, so the thing is just to calm ourselves down. But actually we may be able to distract ourselves. It might alleviate the anxiety for a moment. We might self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, whatever it is, but it doesn't remove the cause. So that anxiety always comes back. And the root cause of anxiety comes directly from attachment, the mind of attachment. So in a way, anxiety is our friend because it shows us something's wrong. So what we're going to have a look at today is the flip side of attachment, which is anger or aversion or hatred. A huge big cloud of things right there. And the catastrophic result of aversion and anger and hatred is depression. So we've kind of looked at the attachment anxiety side of things. Now we're going to have a look at the anger depression side of things. So what's the root cause of depression? Where does it directly come from? It comes from anger. So that's not an obvious trajectory to us, but hopefully by today we'll be able to see how that arises. So we'll have a look at what anger is, because there's quite a difference between aversion, frustration, anger, hatred. There's a spectrum there, and they are quite different in how they manifest. So we'll have a look at those. How anger is like the flip side of attachment. You know, they're kind of like two sides of a coin. Because we don't really know that we have anger or the potential of anger until our desires are thwarted. So they're quite intimately bound up there. And then we're going to have a look at, so what anger is, how it arises, the drawbacks of anger, how it harms us, how to stay calm in difficult situations, which is the 3 types of patience. So when I, first heard about these 3 types of patience, I just thought patience was just like telling yourself, be patient, be patient, be patient, or shut up, shut up, shut up. But actually that's not very effective, as we all know. It takes a huge amount of energy. So there are actually 3 different types of patience that we can learn and employ, and they can become second nature until our mind stays calm in the face of difficulty. So that's what we're aiming at, and that is possible. So let's take a moment to set our motivation. Becoming present where we are in the room, becoming aware of the air temperature, how you're supported by your seat, hopefully how you're in a safe and quiet environment, so you have this window of opportunity to work on your mind, work on your life. And it's pretty fantastic that you're taking this opportunity. Adjusting your posture so that it mirrors a posture of openness and confidence, alertness. An easy way to do this is imagining a thread of light running from the base of your spine up through your body, coming out the crown of your head. Feel as if you're being just pulled up by your crown, by this thread of light. Especially if you're quite tired, if you've had a busy day already, then feel that you're suspended by this thread of light, and all the weight of your body is supported. Let your posture naturally adjust. Let your shoulders drop, pull them back a little bit so the whole chest and heart area becomes open. Just focus on the rising and falling of your breath. Let everything else settle down. Just like autumn leaves come to rest once the wind has stopped. And if the gusts of wind continue, then instead of getting involved in them, instead of getting involved in whatever thoughts or emotions arise, just notice and name them. Just thought or feeling, and put it aside. Any thoughts or emotions that arise, it's like the weather system, but it doesn't fundamentally break the sky or contaminate the sky. It comes and it goes. So as it arises, then let it go. And as if you were a weather reporter, what's the internal weather like today? Without judgment, without going a step further and going, it's good or it's bad, just as if you're reporting on the inner environment today, knowing that it can change. Any feelings of excitement or annoyance that arise, just name them what they are and put them down. Have your sense of awareness above that cloud level, up in that infinite spaciousness of the sky, in which everything arises and falls away. And from this sense of spaciousness, then we can set a really good motivation. What's our purpose for being here? To pacify our mind, to bring harmony to those around us, to contribute to peace in the world, to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But to also go further than that and to look at the very causes of suffering and turmoil and uproot them forever. To go from just band-aid measures to actually looking at the root causes of all of our problems and suffering and doing something about them. And with a confidence and understanding that we can. If we understand the nature of our mind, then we'll see how this is possible. So making a strong determination, this is what we're going to do. Delve all the way into being able to uproot the causes of suffering forever, so that we can bring a lasting state of peace of mind to ourselves and all others. And with a real incentive of how necessary this is. It's a real imperative, but it's possible as well. So taking this sense of determination, of personal responsibility, of confidence, and with this altruistic state of mind, we can dive right in. So we're going to talk about anger, hatred, frustration. And when we're talking about anger, I thought I'd start with a little story from Venerable Gyatso, Adrian Feldman, the Australian monk who's been at the Great Stupa there in Bendigo for a long, long time. So he says, I once read that after a domestic argument, an angry husband rented a bulldozer and reduced his family home to rubble. Now, I remember reading about this because it happened in Adelaide. Can you imagine what was going through his mind? And can you imagine how he felt when he calmed down and realized the folly of his action? Anger is the most destructive force in the universe. It destroys our inner peace, and it causes us to inflict irrational verbal and physical abuse upon our family and our friends, to destroy our possessions, and even to destroy our own bodies through excessive drinking, smoking, reckless behavior, or suicide. Anger makes even the most handsome face look ugly. It harms our physical health. And it leads to isolation and loneliness because nobody can bear to be near us anymore. Buddha taught that the worst effect of anger is not even immediately obvious. Anger destroys our accumulated virtue, thus preventing any chance of future happiness. And karmically, anger leads to future lives of misery. So the last two, you know, that Anger leads to isolation and loneliness. So I have many friends who are very strong in the social justice movement, but when it is motivated solely by anger, even though what they're doing is so important, nobody wants to be around them. No one wants to sit and have tea. In fact, when they come to class and sit down with a cup of tea, people move up and stand up and move somewhere else, and they can't understand why people are avoiding them. It's a real tragedy because they're, fighting for all of these things that really matter. But it's with the mind of anger, and so they're unbearable to be near. So they're completely isolated. It makes them even more and more angry. And not only that, then of course, as we know, when we're angry, we can't enjoy anything. So it destroys our roots of virtue, meaning that we can't access happiness, peace. Even if we have the potential for it, we can't access it. So you just think, for instance, when you're really, really cross, if someone brings you your delicious food, delicious ice cream, delicious cheesecake, whatever it is, your favorite food, you can't even taste it, can you? The capacity for happiness is destroyed. So there is a huge incentive to do something about anger just for our own benefit at the very minimum, let alone looking at what it does for the world, does to the world. So Venerable Gyatso also has taught how anger coupled with hostility it becomes with indifference. So hostility and indifference, those two together are the most destructive force in the world. So not just hostility, but an indifference to the welfare of others means that there's nothing holding us back from harming others. So normally what happens though with anger is that, if we're trying to be a good, decent human being, we just push it down, and that doesn't work. What happens then? It turns into depression. So we'll have a look at that, what to do about that next week. This week, we're going to actually look at, well, what actually is anger and what's happening there. So, when anger first starts, it's pretty much just a feeling of I don't like it. So it's aversion. I don't like it. I don't want it. It's not nice. It becomes unbearable. And then because of that, it leads to all sorts of other disturbing emotions like hatred, belligerence, spite, resentment, revenge. All of these other things then follow. So anger, at least we can recognize it when it arises. It's not sneaky like attachment that feels good in the beginning and then reveals its face. Anger feels bad to start off. So at least we can recognize that it's there. And then we can at least put in place something so it doesn't run away with us, and we don't have to act on it. We don't have to make things worse. We don't have to start justifying it with hateful beliefs, with acquired, worldviews that justify our bad behavior. So the first incentive about anger to actually stop anger is to recognize how it harms us. Because when we're angry, we think being angry is going to help us, don't we? We don't think, now I'm going to destroy everything, all my happiness, all the happiness of others. Great. No. We think by somehow diving into this anger, we'll feel better. So straight away, we have to start by refuting that. So let's have a look. I love this quote. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. I mean, isn't this brilliant? It really is. So anger and hostility and indifference, most destructive force in the world. We ourselves look ugly or terrifying. Now, just like my friend who no one wants to sit with, no one wants to be with, who's incredibly lonely. and can't understand because, you know, she thinks she's a good, decent person and she's been, you know, working for the benefit of others for years and years. But actually what happens, you know, when celebrities, when beautiful people get ugly and they print a photo of that, it's get angry, they print a photo, they look ugly. Doesn't matter how beautiful you are. So we all try and look as good as we can all the time. And yet one moment of anger, it just ruins all of that. Countless dollars of Botox and whatever down the drain just by one moment of anger showing on our face. We suffer. Number one, that's the first person who suffers is us. Whether anybody else suffers may or may not eventuate. So even the purpose of revenge doesn't work. When we're angry, we shut down, especially when we're angry about criticism, for instance, and then we can't actually learn from mistakes. We go, we throw it back, we shut our ears, we don't want to know because it's painful. And so what happens? A barrier goes down and all progress and development stops. It's terrible, isn't it? So we waste criticism, even if it's constructive criticism, we can't hear it. We can't, and then we can't accept help. So people even want to help us and we don't notice. And then we think, oh, the whole world is against me. We take, with anger like this, we take suggestions, we hear them as insults. It's a real tragedy. We destroy our property, we bulldoze the family home, we, you know, all of those years and years of work to pay off the mortgage. We fall into disrepute. People remember us as, oh, that angry lady. So this is one of the reasons I gave up drinking, because after many years of being a happy drunk, I turned into a belligerent drunk. And people started remembering me as that scary lady. Because, you know, I'm quite tall. So when I'm drunk and angry, people like want to get away from me. And I couldn't understand what was happening. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm turning into one of those scary people. So we fall into disrepute. That's the first thing people remember about us, not the second or third thing. We lose or destroy our friends and family. We harm them. We even kill them. You know, domestic violence, and I mean, I don't know about in America, but in Australia, there's a huge amount of domestic violence. And this is people that, you know, ostensibly love each other and care about each other, have thrown their lot in together. And, you know, each year there's one or two husbands kill their wives in Australia every week. And it prevents the future happiness. So I wanted to read you something from this great book called Change of Heart. The Bodhisattva Peace Training by Chagdug Tulku. It's an absolutely brilliant book because it goes a lot into social justice issues, and it's at the end of each chapter, it's got really good questions, really curly questions, psychological ones, you know, ones about the news, about really difficult situations, and the answers are very surprising. So I highly recommend it. It's not just the nice pat answers, it goes really in depth. But this is what he says as an introduction. So the truth is we can rarely force others to act as we think they should or deter them from doing the things that we don't like. No matter how much we may want them to, it's unlikely they will act according to our wishes. And we can seldom prevent difficulties from arising. We need to realize that our habitual approach to challenges, trying to change everything and everyone else, is ineffective. It fails to address the root of the problem, which is the negativity within our own mind. So, Sunny, it's so amazing that you said what you did before class, because here it is. Trying to change the world without changing our mind is like trying to clean the dirty face we see in the mirror by scrubbing the glass. However vigorously we clean it, our reflection will not improve. It's only by washing our own face and combing our own unkempt hair that we can alter the image. And similarly, if we want to help create conditions that foster peace and well-being in the world, we first need to reflect these qualities ourselves. According to an old Buddhist saying, the world is like a great field filled with thorns and sharp objects. Rather than trying to cover it with leather, it's far easier to wear a pair of leather shoes. We face a host of thorny issues with unlimited potential for dissent, strife, and bloody conflict. And none of us, not even the most powerful leader, can remedy them all. If we are to fulfill our short-term goal of resolving conflict and the ultimate goal of eliminating all of our flaws and making evident our positive qualities, we must rely on spiritual or inner methods. Intellectually understanding alone will not make possible the profound inner peace that can influence others. So, I mean, another example is like, you know, if the kids are fighting, us just yelling at them going, shut up. It's not going to bring the result that we want, is it? We actually have to mirror calmness, because human beings naturally mirror each other. And if we want change, we have to actually embody calmness and harmony. We can't force other people to be calm or harmonious. Okay, so I'm just having a look at the questions. We're going to address those questions as we go through, but we've got to go step by step here. Otherwise, we'll get off on a tangent. So if we really want to be effective with dealing with anger, we've got to get a definition. What is anger? We have to have their most wanted poster and be able to tell exactly what it is, so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so we don't just lose all of our energy and our incentive for change. But it's so that we don't corrupt our incentive for change with anger and hostility, which will backfire on us, on the work that we do, and on everybody else. So it's really imperative that we understand exactly what anger is. So here's my most wanted poster. And I didn't realize, but he looks a lot like my ex-husband, which I actually have a real fondness for pirates. I've got to say, I love pirates, and I love the whole pirate kind of approach. In itself, you know, pirates are, you know, they're quite a coherent little world. They're quite egalitarian, you know, because you're all there in the same boat, literally on the sea. You have to look after each other. You rely on each other. So there is a relative balance of power in a way. And many times people became pirates because they were ostracized from their own country. So they started their own rules and everything. So in its own little world, it makes a lot of sense. But there's this fatal flaw, which is it's at the expense of others. So pirates rape, kill, and pillage others for their own benefit. And this is where the whole thing falls down. So I like the analogy of piracy, because when we are angry, we feel right. We feel justified. And we may even have very good reasons, just like the pirates, but it's very one-sided because we're ignoring the incredible destruction that it does. We're ignoring how it harms us, it harms others. The other thing about piracy that's good is that pirates, you know, they have the Jolly Roger, don't they? They have the skull and crossbones. They indicate, you can see them on the horizon. And even if you can't see that skull and crossbones on the horizon, you can see the smoke from other disasters coming up towards us. So with anger and hatred, there are warning signs. We can see the warning signs in our own psyche before it becomes full blown. And this is good. We've got to learn to heed those warning signs. So part of it is in this definition of anger. So here's the definition. it's a diluted mental factor, which means that it's mistaken. It comes from a mistake. And actually, even the word anger, if you remember, so in Webster Merriam Dictionary, Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the word anger in the olden days, it used to mean hurt. You know, like you had an angry sore, an angry wound. So it's not a hostile wound, it's a painful one, it hurts. So first off, anger had this connotation of pain and hurt. And then later on, the idea of retaliation came in. So a diluted mental factor, mistaken, agitated, confused. We know it's diluted because we have unrest in our heart. Observes a contaminated object. So our diluted mental factor observes something or someone else out there who is not perfect. Okay, who's fallible, who has problems or foibles, who is within cyclic existence, who's an ordinary being like you and me. So here we are, that's the state of play. We're under the sway of the delusions of our emotions, our emotional baggage, our hopes, fears, yearnings, and so are they. And neither of us are perfect or thinking clearly. So that's what we're starting with. But so far we don't have anger yet, do we? But what anger does is it exaggerates all the negative characteristics. It looks at all of the problems and everything that's wrong with that person or thing. It exaggerates them. It cannot see anything good, and it builds up those negative characteristics to something far more than what they are. And then, of course, after that, then we consider it bad, undesirable. We don't want it, of course. And if we continue to let it develop, then we wish to harm it, to retaliate. So it's unpleasant. We see that there is no benefit, it's useless, and we don't want it. And not only that, we want to throw it back at them. We wish to harm it. So you can see how this is it's a continuum, isn't it? This trajectory from being kind of low-level default confusion, how it can step by step manifest to complete aggression and hostility and violence. So now, are there any questions about the definition of anger as it's put here? Anything at all? Is it clear so far? Can you see how it's how the trajectory goes? Yeah, Abelardo, what do you have for me? Abelardo, I can't hear you. Oh, there we are. Yeah.
From my studies in psychology, I learned that a component of anger usually is a perceived wrong done to oneself by someone else. Yeah, not just being undesirable. There are studies, for example, that show that babies at the age of 2 months, if you grab their arm and don't let them move, they will elicit an angry response, for example.
Yep. So that would be, that comes into the circumstances that trigger anger, but it's not the mechanism of anger. Because not all babies and not all animals respond like that, and not all the time, because there is the whole thing, for instance, of swaddling babies, which is very calming. And so the actual just holding so you cannot move is a neutral thing. So why is it in some respects it causes, you take it personally and you think they're out to get me and it's against me, and in other respects it's such a relief and it's calming. So I'm just putting that out there. Ivan, can the contaminated object be internal and external, like when you're angry with yourself? Yes, it can be. That's right. The object can be a person, an idea, an inanimate object. a memory, oneself or one's idea of oneself. Yes, that's right. Rhonda?
Yes, you talked a little bit about this before, but if someone's angry about, say, climate change or people who are polluting or something that someone might call righteous anger or that kind of thing, how does that fit within this framework?
Yes. So that's where we really need to have a good definition and to use our speech to bring forth our discriminating wisdom. Because saying I'm angry about climate change may not be accurate. It may be more accurate to say I am concerned about climate change and I find the actions of people unacceptable and I'm doing something about it. And in this definition of anger, there is no anger in there. So why say I'm angry about it? But if you are angry about it in this definition, where you wish to harm or punish the people doing it, where you want to go and kill them and threaten their kids, then that's anger and no good will come of it. So again, with the Buddhist definitions, they're like lifesavers, life rafts that we hold on to for dear life to keep our head above water and actually be able to negotiate all of this. So if we understand the definition of anger or hostility, how it develops, then we'll be able to unwind it step by step to use the power that comes from what we think is anger, but it's actually the power that comes from concern. Instead of it going into hostility and retaliation, it can go into social justice. But the only way we can do that is if we can see it and if we can tell the difference. So there are courses we can do where we learn the difference between aggression and being assertive. So we do know in our mind there's a difference. But are we taught this at school? Are we taught this as toddlers, as babies?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Oren, you've got a question too.
Yeah, well, I was going to save this until later, but now that, okay.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, yeah, I'd said, what if anger makes the person feel powerful? Maybe anger can produce change, for example, political, or it is the only way the person can be effective is to be angry.
Yeah. Yes, so anger can make us feel powerful. That's true in the short term, absolutely. And you may even get the exact result that you want in the short term. But if it's done with anger or hostility, with this intention to harm, then the long term will be worse. So if we just think of it from our point of view, when we are bullied, we may shut up, we may back down, we may give them whatever they want. But in our mind, you know, this is going to have long-term consequences. And if you look at any war in history, the immediate aggression may dominate that country that's being invaded, those people that are being suppressed, yes, in the short term. But does it work long term? No, it becomes interminable conflicts, continuous conflicts. It never works long term with that intention to harm. So our job is to be able to differentiate between concern and have it go over to changing things to benefit others, or concern and go into hostility and killing others. It's a big difference. And both of them start by looking at a situation and finding it unacceptable and no good. But what we do with that really determines the outcome. So if we look at this definition, you know, we look at a situation, okay, we're not perfect, I'm not perfect, they're not perfect, there's a bad situation going on. And then we focus on all the negativities. And then when we just focus on the negativities, how bad the other people are, can we see anything? Can we ever see a way out or a way of resolution when we are only focusing on everything that's wrong with somebody? We can't even see it. Even if it's there, we can't even see it. And then, of course, naturally, we will consider it's undesirable, it's no good, so we have to destroy it. And so then naturally, this wish to harm, destroy comes out of our heart. So what started off maybe as concern turns to hatred. What starts off in colloquial terms as ordinary compassion turns to hatred. So this is a really shocking thing that we look in our own heart and we see, I have compassion in my heart and it results in hatred. How is this possible? It happens because of this mind of anger. So we'll have a look at why in a moment. We'll go in, but just kind of Abelardo, getting back to what you were saying about where anger comes from psychologically. So basically, anger comes from an already unhappy mind. We're already dissatisfied. We have irritation, annoyance, frustration, all of those things. They're one step away from full-blown anger. We're not at peace in ourselves. We're uncomfortable. Things aren't right. So we can see how anger actually comes from the mind of attachment. You know, so we're dissatisfied, we're unhappy, we're craving, things aren't good enough. So our mind becomes unhappy. As Venerable Rabina often says, and it's just such a fantastic statement, anger is what happens when attachment does not get what it wants. So anger, it's there, but it's not always manifest, thank goodness. Attachment, though, it's there all the time. And whilst we can kind of get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it's no problem. But the moment we can't get what we want, the moment our desires are thwarted, then our anger comes up. And then we become aware, oh my gosh, I've got anger. Anger is what happens when attachment does not get what it wants. Dissatisfaction, irritation, annoyance, frustration, they're all just one step away from full-blown anger. So they're all like the smoke or of the pirates on the horizon. And many of us, you know, it can also come from not just an unhappy mind, but from unacknowledged grief, for instance. So many of us, you know, with COVID, right? You know, we're in lockdown for so long, and then we are finally allowed out of the house. And did you notice how everybody is so short-tempered and so raw emotionally and so quick to take offense? And did you notice how easy it was to get unhappy and to burst into tears and how emotional we were? So this is like the grief, the enormity of what this conniption that happened to the world. Unacknowledged grief, we're kind of not aware of it, just simmers around. Then we go out into an environment that's complex, and now suddenly short-temperedness rules everywhere. Everybody takes things personally, and it's a real shock. It's like what's happened to it? What's happened to society? What's happened to me? I'm not usually touchy. Why am I so touchy? Why am I so emotionally raw? So all of this unhappy mind, you know, it's the breeding ground of anger and hostility if we're not aware of what's happening, if we don't acknowledge grief or hurt or suffering. Actually, anger is like the true face of attachment. Anger shows the real nature of attachment. And anger arises where that comes from, the anger and attachment, where they both come from, the reifying view. So we'll go into that in a moment. It's going to be a little shocking for you. The reifying view is something that pretty much unique to Buddhism, I would say, and such an amazing thing to get your head around, because it is the key to everything. But just before we do, some really quick conditions and triggers that we'll see. These are what we normally call the causes of anger. And Abelardo, this is where it comes in, you know, holding a baby's hand and them feeling like, you know, it's a hostile thing, not letting them move. From a Buddhist point of view, these are not causes of anger. They are triggers or conditions. So when our wants and desires are thwarted, triggers our anger. When we feel under attack. So if you've ever tried to use a photocopier that's not working, Do you start feeling like the photocopier is out to get you? The printer's out to get you? Like you start, or the weather. Like I remember when I first came to Queensland and came across 33-degree days at 98% humidity, I just felt like I was under attack. So when we feel like we're under attack, it becomes a trigger for our anger. Dwelling on the faults of others. All we have to do is just think of a few bad things of our best friend, and now suddenly we don't like them anymore. Setting ourselves apart, thinking, oh, I'm different, I'm special. Those are bad people, they're angry, they're out of control of my minds, but me, my anger is justified. I'm different. I would never act like that. I'd never let myself go like that. So we put ourselves apart from others. It's also a big trigger. Taking things personally. So, you know, if you're walking down the street and someone bumps you at the lights. So with anger, you bump straight back again. It's like, how very dare you? So that's the mind of anger. That's a trigger for our anger to arise, and it's like instantaneous. But what if that person bumped you because they have muscular dystrophy and they lost their balance? Like, did we ever have in our mind this idea, oh, are they okay? No, the mind of anger, it's there, it's latent. Someone bumps us, we think they meant to. We take it personally. We assume things should work. They should go as planned. The computer should work. So that's this assumption, you know, it's forgetting that the computer it's a fallible object. The people who developed it are also fallible objects, and so are we. None of these things are perfect, and yet we expect perfection. Of course, we're setting ourselves up for complete dismay all the way up to full-blown anger, instead of just going, oh my gosh, this computer, it's like a crystal ball, you know, it's a miracle. How amazing. And the last one, we assume others are in control. So we know we have this assumption because we have that thought in our mind, they should have known better. So if we use that word should, we're making this assumption that other people have control over their own thoughts and emotions. And we know people don't. We ourselves don't. We barely know what's going on, just like when we finally got out of lockdown with COVID. So these are all triggers, conditions, circumstances. They're not causes. They're not root causes, because they don't always cause anger, and they don't cause anger in everybody. So there's something deeper that's the root cause of anger. So let's have a look. It's the tyranny of the reifying view. The reifying view is a bully. It's an inner bully. It's part of that fundamental ignorance that we have. So if you remember that trajectory, of the big family tree of all the disturbing emotions, the fundamental ignorance that we have, our fundamental confusion, not understanding our nature or the nature of reality, that all of our disturbing emotions arise from. It's this, the reifying view, and it's a tyrant. So what is the reifying view? It's grasping, holding tightly at what appears as being true. So what appears doesn't mean visually appears, but our first feeling of something. Colloquially, bad from its own side. It looks bad, therefore it is bad. It feels bad, therefore it is bad. They act bad, therefore they are bad. Bad from its own side. So if you can think of this in Donald Trump's voice saying bad from its own side, hopefully you'll remember it. That is the tyranny of the reifying view. So pick a politician, any politician, will think they're bad from their own side, won't we? We'll think it's them. But right there, you know, what I might see as a monster, a mother sees as her son, a dog sees as their guru. can't be bad from its own side. Not all bad. That's impossible. But the reifying view is our bully. So thinking that our happiness or suffering comes from out there is what the reifying view does. And it's incorrect. It doesn't stand up to logic. But hey, who's logical when we're angry? The other thing is that when we think that the problem comes from out there, what happens psychologically is we give away all our power. Because if it is out there's fault, there's nothing we can do about it, because we can't control them. We can't control the weather. We have just handed all of our power to them on a platter. So there's not actually much incentive in this one at all. You know, thinking, blaming, that urge to blame, it might give us a very short-term sense of relief, but in the long term, it's disastrous, because now we've given all of our power away and it's incorrect. Two things. So this reifying view is actually the source of every single afflictive emotion and all of our suffering. That's why it's the biggest bully. And the biggest thing that it does is it blinds us to the possibility of change. Because when we think bad from its own side, now we can't see any chink in the armor, any possibility of change, any way in is shut to us. So even if we want to bring change to the world, we can't. It's not going to work. In fact, we're just going to be a bully back. And that may do temporary, get us what we want, but it won't be sustainable. So we demonize the aggressor. We call them evil people or bad from their own side, but they're not, because actually, all living beings, they are potential Buddhas. They are potential good people, just like they're potential bad people. And the moment we think they're evil, they're bad, or they're monsters, we cut that off, and now we can't do anything about it. Now we've let loose a monster in the world, and it's our monster. So, here's a question from Mary La Rosa. Impatience can grow into anger? Yep. Can or should anger ever be turned back down to impatience? So yes, impatience is next door to full-blown hostility and hatred. So impatience, frustration, anger, it's a whole spectrum. And if we let it run on and then we act on it, then it becomes the Buddhist definition of hatred or anger. So it's a bit confusing, because in some texts, hatred and anger are counted as the same thing, or they're translated as the same thing. But actually, anger can be this, big up rush of feeling, but we don't necessarily have that connotation of retaliation in there. The Buddhist definition, when we talk about anger or hatred as those same things, it has this idea of retaliation, and that's where the difficulty comes. So we'll come to what we can do about that, so at least we don't make the situation worse. So the reifying view, that is the root cause. We have the reifying view, these tinted glasses that see things in a distorted way, that grasp onto the appearances as being true. So there's the appearance of a bad person, and then we hold on to that. They are bad from their own side. That's the reifying view. Instead of, say, for instance, if it was our suffering pet, our animal that's sick, and we go to pat them and they bite us. So we have two things happening there. We know they've got aggression, they've bitten us, but we don't think, a monster. We just think, oh my God, they're so sick, they bit me. So there's another thing. So it's not a distorted view. We see one thing, the pet's aggression, but we know another thing, they're suffering. But the reifying view doesn't see that. It just sees bad, and that's all they are. So of course, we exaggerate the faults. So whenever we have an argument with anybody, this is from Western psychology, 80% of it is from our own side, our own projections, and only 20% of it's true. 80% is our own negative mind projecting onto the other person. We think they're all terrible. But actually they're only 20% terrible. We bring our own baggage and we don't even know it. It's our own stuff. So it's so distorted. Why? That comes from the reifying view. So then it expresses itself as we see 80% of its projection. And because it's unpleasant and we're projecting faults, then we see no benefit. So there are some things that are incredibly painful and people pay money to experience them on purpose. It's called going to the gym. So what's the difference here? You know, one is that if you're me, you just think, oh no, going to the gym's awful. Everything about it is bad. There is no way I'm going. But why do people pay good money to go to the gym? Because they see a benefit. And they're not looking at everything that's wrong with going to the gym, all the pain and the suffering and the waste of energy and all of that kind of thing. They're thinking about the benefits. I'm going to look fantastic. I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to be able to do all the things I want to do. And they see the benefits. So the mind of anger is the one that can see no benefit in a situation. And the reifying view thinks that that's true. Of course, if we can't see any benefit, what's our response? It becomes unbearable. We can't bear it. We know that feeling, don't we? I can't stand another moment of this. So we think that's because the thing is so bad, but it's not. It's because we are seeing no benefit in the situation. The moment we find a benefit in there, like a benefit of going to the gym, it becomes bearable and we're even willing to pay money for it. But if we can't see any benefit, it becomes unbearable. And what happens when something's unbearable? We blame others. It's you that did it. It's you that's at fault and you have to pay. So we have retaliation and revenge. And it goes outwards to the other person because we see them as the cause of our suffering, even though it's us, even though it's our reifying view. But the blame, because we're drawn outwards like that, then we blame everyone and everything outside of us, and then we seek to destroy them. And then that solidifies our reifying view. So this is the holding onto the hot coals. It gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So I'll tell you this story, an example of this. Just down the road from Lungri Tongpa Centre, there was a lady. She was coming down the road and getting to her house, and she saw all these police cars outside her house. It's like, what's happening? She'd been going through a custody battle with her ex-husband for the kids. She gets home, and what has happened? The husband has killed all the children, her 3 children, and killed himself. So I can't even imagine the devastation of that. And not only, so that happened when we were at the other centre, the other building on the other side of town, a couple of decades ago. And then just a couple of years ago, down the road from here, from this centre, a husband set the wife and the 2 kids on fire in their car. I heard all the sirens coming. So how does this happen? How come this happens? So the first lady that I was talking about, you know, she was, of course, beyond devastated. But how I found out about this story was on a show called Australian Story about a year later, where they go through these kind of deep things that happen to people. And so she was really amazing, because she said, it wasn't my husband. He was sick. He was sick with his anger. He was a good person underneath, and that was his anger that did that. And that is a pretty extraordinary thing to come up with. But why? Because she actually did care and love about him, care about him. and could see that after the initial trauma of that event, that he was just unable to deal with his aggression and hostility, and blamed her and blamed the courts. And if I can't have the kids, no one will have them, and acted on it. And she could see the trajectory of his anger. So this is this thing that if our men and our boys are brought up like this, of the only way to experience relief from frustration, dislike, and aversion is to express it outwards as retaliation. And yeah, you get some relief, but what happens? You destroy everything, including yourself. So, you know, so big-hearted, this lady, Susie O'Neill, the mother of that guy. Now, she heard that her son had died. The police didn't even get a chance to come to her door. She just saw on the news, oh, this guy is, you know, killed the kids and killed himself. And her first reaction was, those animals, they ought to be shot. So right there, that's the mind of anger manifesting, isn't it? Something arises, we don't like it, we hate it, we see it's all bad from its own side, and we seek to throw it back. Not us, we don't want it. So we can't even accept that it's a fellow human being that's done this. We go, those animals. We distance ourselves from even the pain of thinking about it. They don't deserve to live. They need to be shot. We hear it in the news all the time. Those evil people, those evil kids, those evil Russians, those evil whoever. We distance ourselves, we dehumanize them, and now it's okay to harm them. But what happens if it's your son? So then, you know, she found out, oh my God, that's my son. So discrepancy, can't hold those two things in your mind. So then she said, well, it wasn't his fault. The wife drove him to it. So again, even if that's true, what good does that do? I mean, of course it's not true. But in his mind, it's that reifying view. The reifying view that thinks the bad comes from out there. So then we have this urge to blame it. And all of this comes from being unable to bear it. We can't bear the emotional distress or the trauma. We can't bear the emotional distress or the trauma because we've lost touch of the fact that we care about the other person. It's become all about me. So that takes us back to right at the very, very beginning where I said it's indifference and hostility combined that are the most destructive force of the universe. Because we can have hostility in our mind, oh, I don't like it. But if we still remember, oh, I actually care about the person, like when our pet bites us, or we're trying to shove a pill down their throat, you know, they scratch us or bite us. You know, one side we go, oh, we know they're being hostile and we don't like it. Of course we don't like it. But in our mind, we're also keeping this thought, but I care about their welfare and I love them and I want them to be happy. And I can bear this momentary suffering for them. And so we keep our cool, we keep our equilibrium. So reifying, Oren, reifying means bad from its own side. From its own side, it exists how it appears. We reify it. Okay, so what do we do? Oh my gosh, how do we unpack all of this? Number one, prevention. Heed the warning signs of an unhappy mind. This is the easiest, best thing we can possibly ever do. The moment that we find ourselves dwelling on how we don't like something, halt. Stop right there. Turn your mind around to the faults of anger and remind yourself, if I go down this track, I'm going to lose my cool. I'm going to ruin my immune system. I'm going to raise my blood pressure. I'm going to destroy all my stuff that I've worked so hard for. I'm going to lose my reputation. I'm going to look ugly. Do I want any of those things? No. Prevention. It's like in our kids' class, you know, we got the the kids to squeeze all of the toothpaste out of the tube. Yay, everyone had a whole lot of fun. And then it was like, okay, now try get the toothpaste back in again. It was a very messy class. And of course, everybody's trying to shove the tooth, but you can't. Once anger's full blown, you can't shove it back in again. So prevention, number one. And that's where we can use our sense of, for our own incentive, our own well-being. Remember the faults of anger, not their faults. And every time you think of something that's wrong with them, you must think of another thing that's wrong with anger. One for one. Don't let you, this is we've got to be really disciplined about this. Prevention. For every bad thing that you think about them, you must remember 3 good things about them. 3 things you have in common. And you'll see, no, we don't have anything in common. Yes, you do. We're both human beings. We both had the merit to be born a human being. We both have feelings, therefore we both matter. There's countless things. We're both suffering. We both don't want to suffer. If I had been in the same situation as them, whoa, maybe I would have responded even worse. So prevention, number 1. And then, okay, if the toothpaste is now coming out of the tube and the adrenaline is flowing through you, you can't put that back in again. So then before you retaliate, before you say the thing, run away. Go and lock yourself in the toilet. Leave the room before you punch the person, before you punch the wall. Refrain from harm minimization. Even if in your mind you're going through all these scenarios of harming them, do not act it out. Remove yourself from the situation. Then patience. Well, patience, when anger is stopped by patience, the result is happiness. So what is patience? It's not squishing your anger down. It's actually remaining with a feeling of ease. A mind accompanied by compassion and concern that is undisturbed. So there is a practice how to develop that, and I hope we're going to get to it. The opposite of anger is love or kindness. You can't have kindness and hatred in your heart at the same time because they're contradictory. So another form of prevention is to familiarize your mind with kindness, to practice kindness proactively before you leave the house, to remember how we wish others to be happy. Focus on their good qualities. Think about the good things that they've done. Rejoice in their goodness. Rejoice in the causes of all of their happiness, of their merit, their virtues. Rejoice at the very least in their Buddha potential. So if we have a heart of kindness, there's no room for anger to arise. So it's another of those incredibly powerful preventions. So this is the strategy. Let's have a look at patience. And I wanted to read something to you. Okay. So we've got 3 forms of patience. So this one, being able to remain at ease towards someone harmful or something unpleasant. So I put this picture here of, a sleepless mother with a screaming baby. So how come mothers the world over for millennia have been able to do this, have been able to go through years of discomfort, sleep deprivation, being at their wit's end, at the end of their tether? It's not from focusing on all the bad qualities of the baby, is it? If you focus on how you can't bear it and how everything that they're doing is driving you insane, of course, anger and hostility will arise. So what do mothers the world over think of? They remember how they actually love their baby. They want the best for their baby. They recognize that baby has no freedom, has no emotional freedom. They can't help it. So it takes the pressure off, doesn't it? There are a couple of other things in there of, you know, for babies and animals, it's easy to see they can't help it, isn't it? It's forgivable. But for grown-ups, we think, oh, they should be able to help it. And that thought, if we dwell on that thought, anger will arise in our mind and we'll start hating them. And then what kind of person are we? We are the monster. So what we've got to recognize with adults where we think they should know better is that they are dominated by their bullies, by the internal terrorists. They are completely overwhelmed. They're insane with it. They cannot help it. They have, because human beings, just like you and me, we all have the potential to do something about it, but they're unable to at that moment. So why hate them for it? Why hate someone who is insane? It's, you know, that's just mean. But the thing is, we don't see that they're insane. We see bad from their own side. Sunny, you've got your hand up. Tell me.
Yes, Miffi, I've always thought that reifying was another way of saying that to see something as concrete, not as diluted. But here
Yeah,
you see,
concrete,
here you
like true, like real,
permanent, opposite
permanent.
of impermanence.
Yes, but it's got more, because reifying, it's really close to deifying, isn't it? You know, the all-encompassing, big, out there, concrete, including in that, yes, unchanging, you know, self-sufficient, substantial, true, all of those things. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the reifying view. But what the reifying view is, because we go through those different you know, levels of selflessness and emptiness, but the reifying view is the grasping at it. That's the problem, because we can see one thing, but we can know another, just like with a baby and an animal. But the reifying view sees it and grasps it and thinks it's true, permanent, concrete, from its own side and their fault. You can see why it's the biggest bully of the lot, isn't it? So Anne O'Neill, with this patience of remaining at ease towards someone harmful, this is what she instinctively saw in her husband, even though he did that horrendous action. And why? Because she could see how he was dominated by his anger, that he had no way to deal with frustration or pain or dissatisfaction or his lot in life other than retaliating, other than blaming others and expressing it as violence. So she could see that as the tragedy that it was. So don't think that I'm not excusing that behavior. I'm looking below it to see where it comes from, which is that it is a tragedy. Sarah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, where does forgiveness fit in all of this? Because I'm sort of feeling like forgiveness is a sense of attachment as well. You know, I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around this one.
So are you thinking that you what are you thinking of forgiveness as? Like, what does forgiveness say? What's the
getting past blaming someone for their actions and trying to hold them accountable, I think. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. So forgiveness, we can't force ourselves to forgive. Forgiveness is a response from having actually figured things out and seen them for what they are. So I can forgive my cat from biting me Why do you reckon I can forgive my cat?
Yeah, I mean, you know that they don't know any better, effectively.
That's right. That's it. That's the key. So with a cat, we can understand it. It's easy. Now, human beings, we're the same. We're just a little bit more, a bit more blithe about it, I suppose. So with human beings, it's like we think the human being meant to harm us, but actually, so the story goes, of course, when someone hits you over the head with a frying pan, boom, are you going to get angry at the frying pan or the person? Sarah, what do you reckon?
Definitely the person.
That's right. If someone hit me on the head, boom, with a frying pan, I went, bad frying pan. I hate you, frying pan. Let's ban all frying pans. No more frying pans in the world. You don't think I'm nuts, right? So of course we go, it's not, even though that person never touched me. It was the frying pan that hurt me. I have the round mark and the rust in it, whatever, on my head. It's the frying pan that hit me. The person never even touched me. We know it's the person at fault. So then we look deeper and we go, okay, so that person, did that person hit me? What's driving that person? What is motivating that person? So is it loving kindness? Is it concern? Is it anger, hostility? Is it grief? Is it fear? Is that person in control? Just like the frying pan's not in control, it's the person that's wielding it. What's wielding the person? And what is wielding the person are their disturbing emotions, their fears, their pain, their aggression, their reifying view and hostility. That is what's wielding that person to harm us. So the moment we can see that in others, naturally we'll forgive them, because we'll see they actually have no control at all. And what they're doing is just creating more suffering and more pain for others and also for themselves.
Can I follow it up with another question that's related then? Where, is there a place for holding someone accountable for their actions?
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to hold ourselves accountable too. And so this is the difference between hatred and concern. Because why would we hold someone accountable for their actions? What's the purpose?
I would think, my brain immediately goes to like the most extreme example. Let's think Hitler.
Oh yeah. Like, don't mention the war.
Right. You just think, all right, this person's doing endless harm. Sooner or later, there needs to be an action that steps in to stop what is obviously,
Yeah. So,
if
but why are
you
we
can
stopping
act
it?
to stop.
So what are we doing here? What's motivating us?
To stop, the suffering, the murdering of countless lives.
And why do we want to stop the murdering of others?
It is bad. I mean, to be honest,
because it harms them, right? So
yes.
So this is the thing. Even with criminal justice systems, there's at best two schools of thought. One is that a criminal justice system is punishment, and the other is that criminal justice system is rehabilitation. So there's two very different things here, and it's the same with our own experience. When we find something unbearable and it's unacceptable, and we can see that there's harm being done, now, are we motivated by wanting to throw all of that pain back at them so they suffer? Or are we motivated to change the world so that they no longer suffer and they no longer create suffering? So are we motivated by revenge, punishment, they should suffer like the other people did? Or are we motivated by rehabilitation? They should be held accountable. How do we do that? Educate. So here's the rub, isn't it? We've got to be so honest with ourselves, because so many times emotionally we just go straight to that really base instinct punishment. I want them to suffer as much as I do, and then somehow we'll feel that the balance of the world is restored. But of course, just like they say, with anger you dig two graves, their grave and your own grave. So
what if to make that stop, let's take Hitler. You gotta make Hitler stop. Take that down. What if in order to make that stop, you have to cause harm to that person?
Yeah, so it's just like with a kid, right? If you've got a kid, they're sticking their hand in the fire. You can go, oh, please, darling, can you remove your hand? It may not work. You might go, hey, and they might go, oh, Mummy yelled at me, she's mean. Or they may just be like, whoa, gimme, gimme, gimme. You may have to like grab their hand, and then they're like, Mummy's being violent to me. So what's the difference?
Intent. That's right. And that's why we have to be so honest with ourselves. So is it concern? Are we motivated to act forcefully through concern or through retaliation? Gotcha. Okay, I think I understand that a bit more.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, it's a big one. So this is, in assertiveness training, there's a big difference between aggression and assertiveness. And the only way that we can be assertive is if we feel for the other person. So I read about Hitler to do with the I think it's called the anti-psychiatry movement. Sorry. So a really interesting movement of Western psychology, anti-psychiatry. And one of the studies done was on Hitler and Hitler's background as a young man. And so, the whole culture at the time was quite repressive. And all the way along of growing up, there is a way that if someone had been able to step in and help him emotionally, all of this stuff may not have happened. But because of force and repression and suppression, the perfect storm comes together. But, Hitler, just like Trump, just like, whatever politicians there are at the moment, they are not the cause. They are the result. They are the result of us. They are the result, the long-term result of our culture. So even blaming them, you get rid of one, you're going to get another one. So the only way is to have the incredible courage to look within and see, what do we have in common here? And see how everybody matters. And so then you can act forcefully, but you're acting out of concern. And so what you do will have a beneficial result. The moment you start acting out of revenge or punishment, all is lost. It's not, even if short-term it has some benefit, it's not going to work. Creating fear never created a harmonious society. So now to put a spanner in the works even more. Here we are. This is from Lama Yeshe. No matter how much wealth and material possessions that we've accumulated, no matter how many decades that we've studied, and no matter how good our reputation, no matter how many people we have below us working for us, if we don't practice patience and the good heart, we will have no peace of mind at all. Even if we've spent millions of dollars on houses all over the world, as long as we haven't dealt with the self-cherishing mind, we'll have no peace of mind. Where does peace of mind actually come from? It comes from the enemy. In practice, the person who disturbs us is the one who offers us peace of mind. By practicing patience and generating loving kindness and compassion for this person, our anger diminishes. Year by year, we find it harder and harder to get angry. And when we do, it lasts for shorter and shorter periods of time. Friends and helpers don't give us the opportunity to practice patience, loving kindness, and compassion. We have to rely on our enemies for that. So this is why Buddhist psychology is so radical, because where does peace of mind actually come from? It comes from the enemy. So what this is saying is, unless we come face to face with adversity, unless our attachment is thwarted, we won't even know that we have hostility within us, that we have hatred in our heart. And then it erupts, and then we see it. And then we have a chance to do something about it. So, you know, being with our friends, everybody who says, yes, yes, you're great and fantastic, we don't get any practice at that at all. But we only know if we truly love somebody, if we do have patience in our heart, is when we care about them and they do something bad, or they're bad to us, or they stuff up in some way. And then it's like, now how much do I care about them? And now how much can I bear the insults, bear the situation in order to help them? And, you know, if we want to do something about the world, it's got to be from helping people, because nobody ever acts badly or with hostility or creates trouble through a happy mind. It always comes through unhappiness. No one harms from a happy mind. So we've got to, that's the crux of the matter. We've got to keep that in mind and recognize it comes from unhappiness. And if we want to really change things, then we have to alleviate that unhappiness. We have to work at that fear and that unhappiness. We have to work for the enemy. We have to help the enemy. We have to pacify the enemy. We have to educate and be assertive and be really creative, and never ever act from the retaliation. Because the moment we act from retaliation, just like with our kids, the moment we lose it, they know, don't they? And then they put the screws on even further and they trigger us even more. They know when we're about to lose our temper. They can suss it out. So how do we do that? Well, one, we voluntarily bear the suffering. We remain at ease towards someone harmful by recognizing all of these things, that they have no emotional freedom, that there can be a benefit for us. We can become stronger, better people. We can understand others more. We'll have courage. And when there's nothing that we can do about the situation, instead of fighting against it, going, no, 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 I can't bear it, which just creates more turmoil in our own mind, we recognize, okay, in a situation I can do nothing about, there's no point being hostile. I may as well relax even more. Just like if you get an injury, there's no point being angry as well. When the floods come, there's no point being angry at the weather. There's just no point. It just harms us. So we voluntarily accept suffering. And we do this very easily when you go to the gym. You voluntarily accept suffering. In fact, you invite suffering in. Why? Because we can see there's a benefit. So this is a huge way of generating patience, growing this patience within us. And there is one section of society that's very good at this, of being able to see the benefit, and that is entrepreneurs. So while everybody else is throwing their hands up in the air going, we're all doomed, this is terrible, there's not one good thing about it, an entrepreneur sees an opportunity. Now, usually it's motivated by making money. Very rarely is it motivated by helping others, but sometimes it is. Oh, here's a perfect, way we can help others. But the only way that we can even see that possibility is by thinking there's going to be a benefit in here. There's a benefit for me. So we stop fighting. What else? And certainty in the Dharma. So we cannot control the world, but we can protect our own mind so that no matter what happens, we can stay calm. We cannot stop the rain of misfortune, of change, of sickness, aging, and death. We cannot stop that. Trying to make the rain go back up into the heavens, trying to make the hail stop, it's not possible. And expending all of our energy of changing everyone and everything out there first, it's a losing game. What we can do is have our precious umbrella, the precious brolly. So the precious brolly, that is the protection of the Dharma. So it's another one. Instead of trying to stop the weather, if we protect our mind and we're able to keep our mind peaceful and calm in the face of adversity, what an incredible strength that is. What amazing confidence that we get. And then we can usher people under our little umbrella as well. So I wanted to continue the story with Susie O'Neill. So this lady, you know, who suffered this incredible devastating loss, this incredible aggressive act, and not just of, you know, killing her children, but that killing himself too. So then the whole guilt, you know, and he said, you know, you made me do it. So she found a benefit in this situation, and she kind of determined nobody else should go through what I went through. This is not right. You know, this is unacceptable. But it wasn't through this force of punishment or retaliation. It was through concern, you know. This is an unbearable thing. I cannot let it happen again. So she started up a self-help group. It's not a self-help group for women. She started up a self-help group for men, for estranged husbands. I mean, how mind-blowing is that? So her self-help group was for the husbands that are there against the wall, feeling the whole world is against them, feeling that everybody hates them, and being, you know, unable to bear the fact that maybe they have to share the kids, all of that kind of thing. How to help them deal with their trauma and their aggression, because that's what she saw. That's where the problem was. Now, what's so amazing about this is, I think if you're a guy, there's no way you'd go to a self-help group like that if you thought you're being judged, if you thought they were saying you should have known better. The only way you'd go to a group like this is if you felt that she was on your side, that she cared about you. And that's how big-hearted that move of hers is, to really help where the help is needed, to see these guys have no help. Our whole society just encourages them to express violence. How can I help them? So to this day, those self-help groups are still going. It's just extraordinary. So that's the big-heartedness. So there's got to be a benefit. The benefit doesn't mean that it makes everything that happened okay. It's not being an apologist. It's not saying, oh, you know, it was meant to happen, or, you know, it wasn't that bad or anything like that. It's really looking squarely at the situation, but it's seeing underneath. So the reifying view would say those husbands, they're bad from their own side. But she saw underneath that to suffering human being who she fiercely cares about. I mean, how inspiring. Not even a Buddhist, right? But, you know, acting, this is really the essence of it. So certainty in the Dharma. Here is another thing. The certainty in the Dharma, how to develop this sense of courage that we need to be this honest. So this comes from Buddhism for Dummies, Jonathan Landau, developing certainty in the Dharma. Basically, training your mind is the only reliable way of protecting yourself and fulfilling your highest potential. So that's that protection of the Dharma. But old habits are hard to break. So when difficulties arise, your tendency is to react to them in the same unskillful and destructive ways you've always used. In other words, when push comes to shove, you tend to forget all the Dharma you've ever heard and shove back. So this third aspect of patience involves searching for the appropriate Dharma solution to each problem that you face, and then making a concerted effort to apply this solution directly to your present situation, no matter how hard it may be. So, you know, that really takes some presence of mind, courage, some mindfulness practice. This is what mindfulness is for, not to kind of be aware of what the fork is doing or eating the food or whatever. Mindfulness is be aware of when your mind is getting uncomfortable, when your mind is getting dissatisfied, and being very aware and applying your Dharma wisdom right then before it escalates. So patience, you know, if we develop patience, we all want confidence, don't we? We want to be liked, all of those things. Where does it come from? Patience. How do we learn patience? It's only in hostile situations, situations that we don't like. And so when we have this feeling of aversion arise, this can be good for us because we can use it. It's like our own personal emotional gym. Instead of to try and make the other person do what we want them to do, to really look at our own mind. And if we can do this, if we can develop this sense of ease when things go wrong, and being able to see how we still have things in common, even if it's someone I totally disagree with everything that they're doing, we still have our common humanity, then that shows us where's the way forward. Then we can really do something in the world. Then we can have lasting change. So, you know, feminism isn't just for women, is it? Feminism is to liberate everybody, and it cares just as much about the welfare of men as women. The circumstances are different, but if feminism just cares about women and not men, it's never going to work. The same thing with any form of war, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about. He doesn't talk about the Chinese invading. He says when the Chinese army invaded, not the Chinese people. He cares about the Chinese people as much as the Tibetan people. And when we think about, you know, Russia, the Russian army invading. So it's not Russia. It's not all of Russia. It's the Russian army, and it's not even the Russian army only. But all of those individuals in that army, conscripted in, under the sway of propaganda, pushed by peer group pressure, maybe having no other possible job, finding themselves in a situation they don't like and finding it unbearable, and then going blaming. So of course the blaming goes to the other. So we don't have to agree with war, but we can understand what's going on, and we can feel real concern for everybody. And if we feel concern for everybody, then there's a way out. There's a way to stop this through human to human interaction, caring about others. It's the only way to happen. And we need such big-heartedness for it, such courage. So in your notes, there's some common misconceptions. Anger gives us energy. Well, actually, concern gives us energy and anger corrupts it. If we don't get angry, people push me around. Well, again, assertiveness stops people pushing us around. Anger means we just push others around. Venting makes it less. When we vent, what are we doing? We're practicing aggression. So we're releasing some energy, but we're also practicing aggression. We're part of the problem, not the solution. We think we have a right to be angry. No, we have a right, but not to be angry. We have a right to happiness, but not to be angry. Self-defense. What about self-defense? Well, I love this one because the very best self-defense uses the power of the other to disable the other. And that's what we can do with aggression. Use the power of aggression to disable aggression. We may think some hatred is justified, like the war against terrorists or criminals or whatever, but that actually, it's actually blind to the actual situation, what's actually happening, which is when you fight, it's like chopping off the head of the hydra, isn't it? Then you get 100 more. So we've got to look at the underlying inequalities, injustices. The question we've got to ask ourselves, are we being aggressive or are we being assertive? And so that takes it right back to, you know, Sarah, what you're saying about what our motivation is, what our intent is. So is our intent anger, i.e. revenge, punishment, harm, retaliation, or is it concern, fierce concern? And if it's concern, you know, that's what motivates us to be assertive, and concern cares for me and for the enemy. Oh boy. So when we talk about anger, really what it is that retaliation, intention to harm. When we're talking about patience, if we can use these difficult situations to develop our patience, actually patience becomes something even bigger, because it's the remedy for all difficulties, not just anger. It's the remedy for all problems, for every kind of uncomfortable thing, all the way to really extreme trauma. Patience is the remedy for all of it. It's an incredibly strong frame of mind. Being able to remain at ease, peaceful in the face of difficult circumstances. So there are worksheets there, and there's a feeling tone meditation and a meditation on the kindness of others, and the TV homework. All right, so Airport USA, oh, it's fantastic. You know, the people on the help desk, how they remain calm and friendly in the face of everyone yelling at them, being beside themselves. It's just brilliant. I find it so inspiring. And the other one is one called Hotel Impossible. This bald-headed guy, I think he's got an army background, and he goes into really impossible, dysfunctional hotels where you think, oh my God, there's no hope for them. And he helps them come to terms with whatever's going on and see the situation, and he does it by talking to their best selves. And it's just brilliant, the transformation. A second best from that is Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, but I like Hotel Impossible much more. Next week, we're going to have a look at finding the wisdom in depression, Buddha's radical remedies for depression. Because if we don't deal with anger, if we can't deal with anger, we just squish it down, it turns into depression. And then it's really hard to shift. So that's why we talked about this one first. So, all right. Just before we finish, there's a question here from Marianne about I don't understand why venting about something is bad. So venting is a mixed bag, because one thing is we're expressing our anger, so we're bringing it to the fore. We're often expressing our hurt, so we become aware of it, and that is good to become aware of what's going on in our mind, and to not squish it down so we still have the energy. But on the other hand, it's motivated by indifference to the welfare of others and hostility, throwing it out there, retaliation. It's not motivated by care. And it is practicing being belligerent and negative about things. So we get hardwired into our brain, just like violence is an expression, it's a relief. We get hardwired into our brain the expression of violence and relief. So it can only lead to bad things instead of the expression, the relief, and it turning into concern, for instance. So venting is this practice that turns it into violence, that familiarizes us with retaliation. So even though our energy is there, it causes destruction. It's so sad that those things get wired together, get mixed up together. So our job is to be able to keep the energy without it being harmful. The only way we do that is if we care about others. And the only way we care about others is if we see they're just like me, they're just like us, and they don't want to suffer just like I don't. So that's what we have to dedicate to, that we can be big-hearted enough and courageous enough that we can see how everybody, including the enemy, are just like me, and they matter just like me, and I care about them just like me. And I can't bear for them to act negatively or destructively. And so I must absolutely help them. And that way I can bring peace to them, peace to me, peace to the world. So that's the Bodhisattva peace training, being a Bodhisattva warrior. So let's dedicate to that. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. You're the living example of it.